Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, wherever you're joining us from around the world. Welcome to episode 84 of Web3 Warriors, featuring Karen Shidlo, marketing manager for Fiat24, which is an awesome crypto payments company, and also a strong blockchain advocate herself. Welcome, Karen. How are you doing today?
Hey, yeah, I'm really good, thanks. It's really cool to be here for a second time. And you're doing a really good job.
Thank you so much. I appreciate you. Yeah, we were able to talk about your company that you're working with, Fiat24, last time you were on the show. And I'm really happy to be able to reconnect and appreciate you reaching out and all the words of encouragement as well. And we continue to plug away in this Web3 blockchain space and build and network and connect with others. So yeah, welcome everyone to Web3 Warriors. I'm your host, David Krome, go by Krome in the metaverse. And today we're going to be looking kind of at the state of cryptocurrency adoption worldwide, and really just how things are moving, how things are kind of shifting. We know that the financial world is going through a lot of big changes around the world. We know that governments are kind of rushing to regulate and be prepared for basically the digitization of global finance, right? So looking at kind of how crypto is changing the game with decentralized peer-to-peer payments, making it very easy to send and receive money anywhere in the world, and how this is especially helping a lot of developing areas of the world. We've talked to people from Ghana, Nigeria, India that have been able to really kind of make a way for themselves using crypto, using whether it's art or any type of expression, being able to sell that on the blockchain to supporters, to creators, and also just for finance, for actual point of sale payments and being able to actually exchange value with other people without having to rely on some of the more traditional antiquated systems, which are not as reliable in a lot of these corners of the world, right? Whereas, maybe Europe, Canada, United States, we have some pretty good reliable banking systems, some would say, but other places, it's not so reliable and getting cash is not so easy. And, a new world is around the corner where you might just not need that cash and you can just pay using your e-wallet, using crypto on your phone. So we're looking at that conversation and kind of how that's changing. And of course, that bleeds into the NFTs conversation and the metaverse and how the digital world is essentially taking on this new value through decentralized cryptocurrencies, but also how our societies kind of meeting this new digital era, and we hear the conversation around CBDCs, which are central bank digital currencies. Maybe we'll talk a little bit about that. Karen's joining us from Switzerland, where in the EU they've been a little bit further ahead, I think, than us in North America when it comes to this conversation around CBDCs and also just crypto regulations in general. So we'll have a little bit of a chat around that. And yeah, just really looking at how the digital assets and being able to sell digital assets on the blockchain is really changing life for a lot of people around the world, and especially again in the developing corners of the world. So with all that, I'm really excited to be able to talk to you today, Karen, and thanks again for joining. Maybe before we dive into some of the cryptocurrency conversation and how things are changing, I'd just love to hear from you. How are things going? What's new and exciting? Anything you'd like to share about what you're working on in Web3 these days? And I noticed you had that blockchainbabe.eth, so that's a pretty interesting ENS address there, Ethereum name. So that's pretty cool. But what's new and exciting for you?
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, I'm glad I managed to get Blockchain Babe locked down, although I do think there are a few other people kind of using this alias online, but yeah, it's a cool name.
No doubt.
Yeah, in terms of for myself, I'm still at Fiat24. Like now I'm coming into almost 2 years there. It's been a cool year. We managed to travel a lot, go to a lot of cool conferences. Just 2 weeks ago, we were in Barcelona at the European Blockchain Convention, which was really very interesting to see. And I think now, like we're in November, we're closing another year. It's gone by really fast, but I think we've seen a lot of changes in the crypto payment space. And yeah, I mean, that is still what interests me both like through my work and just personally. But I think we've seen that this intersection between DeFi and crypto payments this year, I think it's already quite significantly altered the traditional financial landscape in several ways. Yeah, I mean, I think we've seen like these giants like PayPal, and Google, like despite maybe the fact that we've experienced like this bear market over the year, I mean, We have still seen Google actively investing in blockchain and Web3. PayPal also recently announced it would be the first major US financial institution to launch its own stablecoin. And then we have BlackRock, which has filed for a spot Bitcoin ETF. So I think it's been a fascinating year, to be honest.
A lot of big names trying to kind of get their way onto the blockchain in one way or another. I was really interested to see that Google signed up with Solana, which apparently has been leading to quite a bit of a jump. I know Solana had some other good news over the last couple months. I think Visa also combined their on-chain services with Solana. Any thoughts around that? Like, do you think that Solana's making a wave kind of for a reason, just because of their cheap transactions? Or do you hear much about Solana out in the EU or in Switzerland in the payments conversation?
Yeah, I think Solana Pay has been quite interesting. Then they came up with this Solana phone.
Right, I heard about that one too, yeah.
And then there's also Shopify, which made this big deal with Solana Pay, which is really interesting too. And personally, I'm very happy because I did buy quite a lot of Solana earlier in the year, and it was kind of a bit slow. But now, like, the price has jumped quite a lot. But I think it's great. Since I joined the crypto world, I have seen that there are a lot of cool projects being built on Solana. So I was kind of surprised to see that it's been a bit slow. But I think now with Solana Pay, it's become quite interesting and it's doing well. So I'm excited to see what happens with
I actually didn't realize that Solana was kind of making that move for the payment space. I've been hearing more about them in the DeFi and more in the gaming space for sure, but I didn't realize just how much they had really been working and putting that groundwork in to get the payment side of things. And then they announced Visa, now they announced Google integration with their cloud and their payments. So that's really interesting. And I also have a very small bag of Solana, but not financial advice here. We don't do that investment advice, but it is interesting to see, and it'll be cool to see if it does continue to kind of blow up from here. And a lot of people are, kind of speculating that we're on the corner of a bull market. I'm still not fully convinced of that, but it does seem to be moving in that direction. Do you have any thoughts or perception on that?
I think it does seem like we're moving in that direction. I think as of, when was it? Like, just today's the 4th, on October 31st, we saw that the price of Bitcoin was up to 34,000, and still the market capitalization is huge, like 670 billion. I think, we have seen BTC, but also crypto in general, be under some pressure because of inflation, like especially in the US and the UK, there's still this like crucial issue of inflation. And then the Federal Reserve, like, I think I read they like hiked the interest rates again to tackle these inflation issues. But because of the Bitcoin halving that's coming up, I think people are optimistic. But beyond just Bitcoin, I personally working in this sector, I feel like the sentiment is predominantly that we are like, the worst part is over, and maybe in next year we do start the next bull run.
No doubt. It's going to be interesting to see. I think that the halving is definitely something that's coming up. For those who don't know, that means that the amount of Bitcoin getting paid out to the miners is actually cut in half again, which happens roughly every 4 years, I believe. And we're coming up on that point in the springtime of next year. So I think they're looking at March, April. And when that happens, generally in the past, there is sometimes a little bit of a slump, but then usually things go a little parabolic around that time as well. So a lot of speculation around that. Again, not financial advice, but it'll be interesting to see, where things go. So going back to the payments conversation, I was taking a look at your blog a little bit there and looking at this concept of having a crypto payments card versus a debit payments card. And, I was mentioning to you before we went live that, I'm also in the fintech space and in the payments space, more so on the digital payments side. But I love the idea of a point of sale crypto payments card. In Canada, we have a platform called ShakePay, which actually allows you to have both Bitcoin and Ethereum in your wallet, but then your actual fiat wallet as well. And when you pay with the fiat wallet, you actually get a 1% back in Bitcoin, which is like a really cool kind of easy Web3, like pro Web3, pro crypto way to still be using a fiat debit card, but getting some crypto out of it. But I'm just curious, looking at that conversation, and maybe things are quite a bit different over in Switzerland or in the EU more broadly. How does that look, and how is Fiat24 kind of navigating that conversation around point of sale payments and integrating crypto into that equation?
Well, I think what we do is a little different than other crypto card offerings. Well, I think basically what we offer is it's a really Web3 infrastructure. If you compare to, for example, Binance or Coinbase, they're forcing you to connect to a CEX, like a centralized exchange, and also to be stuck inside their ecosystem. Whereas we just offer a dApp, and you can connect via any non-custodial wallet that you like. You can also hold your account with us in several wallets, which is cool. And also, to open an account, you need to mint our NFT. So there's no password, there's no login. In a way, to a certain extent, you can still remain anonymous. So that's kind of different. And also, through the dApp, you can just convert your Ethereum or your wrapped Bitcoin or whichever kind of token you want to euros. For now, the card is just supports euros. Yeah, you just convert it, and then you immediately your card is topped up, and it's inside your Apple Pay. And it's a Visa card, which is cool. It's a debit card. So basically you can just spend it like how you would use your Visa card anywhere. And Visa is accepted in most places, online and offline.
100%. That actually sounds a lot like the ShakePay app I was just mentioning, except they haven't incorporated NFTs at all yet. And I don't think they have that kind of anonymous option. Here in Canada, our financial regulations are quite strict when it comes to the AML and the KYC and all that. But that's really fascinating. That's really cool. And it makes sense that it would only be EU, same way with ShakePay. It's only Canadian dollars. And I think, these jurisdictions are so radically different right now, looking at America and the whole conversation coming around the ETFs and the SEC, which we don't have to get into, but that's a whole weird kind of adversarial perspective that they seem to be taking with crypto, right? Whereas when I look at what Europe's doing and I look at what Canada's doing, it does seem to be more kind of pro-innovation. I think there's less antagonism. Obviously the traditional banks don't want to become irrelevant tomorrow. So, they're all kind of slow walking and looking at ways to kind of integrate TradFi, as we call it, traditional finance, right? But it is really great that it seems like Visa's fully on board, right? Because they don't make any loss. A payment is a payment. So if you're getting that payment, from Bitcoin or from Ethereum, and then you happen to make a payment in fiat, once it's converted, they're cool with that, right? So it's really interesting to see how there are already, as you were mentioning earlier, major brands that are kind of fully on board with this Web3 crypto wave. And then, a lot of traditional banks, traditional brands that are still, not as kind of excited about it, I think. So in Europe, you also have the conversation around CBDCs happening, right? So I'd love to hear your thoughts on that. And I actually am not very familiar with just how far along that is in Europe. So how are CBDCs kind of being introduced to the society, and what do you think about it? Is it a good thing? Do you think it's going to actually work?
Well, first of all, to answer your thing about Visa, I actually read that they were kind of reining back a little bit because of the problems that we've seen, like Binance and other and Ripple. And, now that they've seen this kind of government reaction, I think that they're being a little bit cautious. And actually the way that they do work with crypto or blockchain projects like ours is, we still have to fulfill a lot of requirements, and we have to go through a lot of the process of to follow their regulations just like any other company would.
Of course, yeah.
So I think, yeah, they are embracing this new technology, but I think they are being quite cautious about it, to be honest. But yeah, about CBDCs in Europe, we now have what's coming out is called MiCA, which stands for Markets in Crypto Assets. It's a new regulation in the EU, and it is related to like services related to crypto assets and stable coins. It was adopted earlier in like the spring of this year, and it will become enforced like starting next year. So I definitely think the EU is much more friendly than what we see in the US. And it's actually going to be the first regulatory framework for crypto assets in the whole world. And it's going to cover issuers and service providers. And the point is to protect consumers and investors, but allowing this financial stability and innovation. And I think that's really exciting, and it seems to be going in a much better direction than what we see in the US, where we see that it's very complicated. And I mean, how have you seen it in the US?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's interesting because America's got this really wild scenario where the federal government functions or dysfunctions in its own way, and then you have the state level kind of doing their own thing as well, right? So you have states like Florida, I think Texas, although there's been more mixed bag in Texas lately, being very pro Bitcoin, very pro crypto. Even New York, which, you know, on the regulatory side, the banking side, have been very anti crypto, but you've had the mayor talking about, you know, loving Bitcoin, and there's still a narrative out there that they're pro innovation and pro crypto. So it's really weird because it kind of changes from both like the micro civic kind of mayoral level to the state level, and then to the federal level. There's like such a weird kind of range of viewpoints. In Canada, it's a little bit more like Europe, I would say, where crypto is kind of put in this bucket of innovation, and everyone kind of accepts that it is a good thing in general. But there's just obviously some security concerns and wanting to make sure that there are, you know, anti-money laundering kind of processes in place, which I think exists in traditional finance too, right? And we know that these horrible things happen in traditional finance too, and nobody's got the 110%, you know, secure option. That's really what it comes down to. So yeah, I mean, America just looks like a bit of a mess because there are so many competing interests, but I'm cautiously optimistic about the way the conversation is kind of evolving in America. But Canada, I think, is a lot more like what Europe's doing. So I look forward to, you know, those regulations being hopefully pro crypto. To your point about the MiCA, what did you say that acronym standed for? Crypto assets?
Markets in crypto assets.
Markets in crypto assets. Okay. That's really interesting. Yeah. And so it's basically trying to regulate entire markets, any markets that are touching crypto. So that's going to include the NFTs. It's going to include the metaverse, as well as like cryptocurrency providers, like exchanges. That's a very big
I'm not
order.
sure about, metaverse stuff, but they defined it as a digital representation of value or rights, which may be transferred and stored electronically using DLT. So I think the regulation draws a distinction between cryptocurrencies on one hand and tokens on the other. I think it's a little bit complicated, and I have to read a little bit more.
No, that's
but
great.
Basically, they're going to make crypto asset service providers, like, force them to be registered, and then implement certain security measures and AML compliance there. But that's only a good thing, I think, because as long as
the differentiating between cryptocurrencies and the tokens is good, because, you know, it's when you're getting into this space where you're treating all NFTs as some investment, as some cryptocurrency, that things just get off the rails, I think. So at least they have that distinction there.
Yeah, I think that actually, I just read that NFTs and CBDCs fall outside the scope of MiCA. So it's actually just going to be focused on
cryptocurrency. Okay, so NFTs don't even fall under MiCA. That's pretty cool. So looking at the CBD, sorry, continue.
No, I'm just saying, like, NFTs, I think, are a little bit, it's maybe still too early to try to regulate or figure out this stuff, right? I mean, NFTs are more complicated. Even when I've been to some different conferences around Europe and Switzerland, we have had some talks about the legalities and regulation and stuff about NFTs, but people are just hypothesizing now. It's not like we have, any idea of how it will shape up.
Yeah, there's definitely a lot of speculation, a lot of hypothesis for sure out there. But that's really interesting. And on the CBDC piece, is there anything like really clear? Like, what is the actual goal of the central bank digital currency? Because I think EU kind of rolled it out already, didn't they? Or are they? It's like pretty close.
Yeah. So just a couple of weeks ago, the European Central Bank published something about moving the digital euro to this preparation phase. And yeah, I mean, we're progressing towards getting a digital euro, but it will take like 2 years starting from November 1st. And I don't think it's a decision to launch a CBDC, but I think that, they're kind of exploring like this kind of stable coin and seeing what happens. So
Awesome. Yeah, a digital stable coin that's actually decentralized, or even that's managed by essentially banks, right, could work better than a central bank digital currency, which is very, very top down. At least if you have different entities kind of managing stable coins that are actually all on this kind of transparent, accountable network, and not just like super concentrated by basically the government or the central bank. I think that's the better way to go. And I know we had spoken to Emmanuel Daniel quite a few, about 40 episodes ago, and he's a big advocate for stable coins. And he straight out said that he thinks CBDCs are going to fail, and they just, they're not going to work, because on one hand you have a lot of privacy concerns, but on the other hand you also just have a lack of innovation. Like, decentralized stable coins just simply work better and they're more reliable, basically. So CBDCs seem like a kind of pipe dream, or like a wish of a lot of central banks. And we see China kind of rolled theirs out, but, do we want a Chinese style, economic system? I don't know.
Yeah, well, what I read is that this digital euro, it kind of aims to ensure that central banks won't be able to see the personal data of users.
Okay.
And the promise is that this offline CBDC will achieve like a cash-like level of privacy. And I read a quote from Christine Lagarde, who's the president of the European Central Bank. I have it here, and she said, "We envisage digital euro as a digital form of cash that can be used for all digital payments free of charge and that meet the highest privacy standards. It would coexist alongside physical cash, which will always be available, leaving no one behind." And that's very progressive and really cool, especially when you do compare to the US. That's pretty amazing.
And I do like the idea that they straight up say like physical cash will always be available. Like, it's not about like forcing everyone into this super centralized digital version. And the idea that they're trying to protect privacy. That is very forward thinking and relatively progressive in this space that is continuing to evolve and innovate. But that is pretty cool. Thanks for sharing that, Karen. That's really awesome. Some good insights to our friends over in the EU. That's why we love to have a global dialogue, global conversation here at Web3 Warriors. And I appreciate you joining for this perspective. It's really amazing. I know you also had some thoughts around kind of the NFTs that are bouncing off of the digital world and into the physical world, right? So we saw with Pudgy Penguins, for example, or we had VFriends with their new like collectible cards, essentially, that kind of emulate the NFTs that exist. How do you feel about that conversation and the idea that, at one point it seemed like the NFTs being digital was enough, and being part of this exclusive club that, got all kinds of interesting digital assets was sufficient, and then that seemed to have kind of died out and not had as much excitement, at least in the last like year or so. So now you see a lot of them kind of trying to sell physical assets, and now we have the phygital conversation, right? Mixing the digital with the physical. So how do you feel about, Pudgy Penguins being available in Walmart? And do you think that this kind of trajectory for NFTs is ultimately a good thing?
Well, I'm kind of torn. On one side, I think it kind of, I don't want to say cheapens the brand, but I think I'm not sure about this crossover into the physical world, to be honest. I'm not sure that it's going to achieve what they think it will achieve, because maybe I just go into Walmart and I think, oh, this is so cute, and then I buy it, but I'm not going to take the next step into NFTs. Maybe it's just a small percentage, you know. Maybe we give a little bit of a awareness to say like, oh, what is an NFT? But I think somehow it cheapens it in a way, and it also gets far away from what NFTs are supposed to be in the first place, which is something digital, which is all about like ownership, you know. I don't know, like it's so ingrained in like your digital identity that making a toy out of it doesn't seem right. On the other hand, I think what Pudgy Penguins are doing is cool because it's the first mass market NFT IP product, which is licensed directly from the community. And that in itself is quite an interesting concept. But personally, I'm not really that impressed. I mean, I always liked Pudgy Penguins. It's one of the OG NFT projects. It's cool. But now with this toy, I just don't see how it's going to like help them achieve what they think it will. I mean, apparently it just took a few days till they made $500,000 worth of sales through Amazon and Walmart. But yeah, I mean, I don't know. I'm a little torn about it.
Yeah,
what about
it'll be
you?
interesting to see how that revenue, if at all, you know, goes back into the project and then the holders, you know, more broadly, right? And I think there was the attempt, and I don't know. I know. Shout out to K-Bot. I'm not sure if he's watching us, but he had also actually got one of those for his birthday. And I believe there was like a QR code attached to the Pudgy Penguin, and then you would be able to scan it and get some kind of Polygon NFT. So you actually do get an NFT with the physical, which in a sense could be, you know, good for adoption, good for, you know, that conversation around people who have no idea what an NFT is and see a cute Pudgy Penguin and they get it, you know, maybe for Christmas or something. And, you know, even kids are starting to understand QR codes, right? Like my boy's 5 years old. Every time he sees a QR code, he'll be like, Daddy, scan that. What is that? Because he knows that it'll bring up something on my phone, right? So it's kind of an interesting concept that maybe on the flip side, when it comes to adoption, it does start new conversations where they weren't going to happen otherwise. But that being said, I think a lot of their base of customers are obviously most likely already in the Web3 space. So I'm not sure how much that education is coming through. But over time, maybe, you know, if the brand actually does outpace its, you know, on-chain project and becomes a broader brand that people like and enjoy, even those who are not familiar with the NFTs, then maybe, you know, they adopt and actually embrace the NFTs and use those QR codes to get some freebies. So I'm hoping it's good for adoption, but I agree that you don't want to veer too far away from the digital space, right? So what about the metaverse conversation? Do you think that would be a better solution, like taking your NFTs into a kind of custom digital space where your community can meet and, you know, collaborate or build or just have weekly, you know, sessions, whatever the case might be? How do you see the metaverse conversation going, and do you think that has a better use case for NFTs?
I think it's quite sad, but from my perspective, I think over the past 6 months, or maybe even a little bit more, I don't really see like the metaverse taking off as much as we thought it would. I don't know if that's just from like the stuff that I'm in contact with or the people, but I don't know, like I've seen the metaverse isn't really that top of mind anymore. I think that was really popular last year, and this year it's all about AI and Bitcoin. Yeah. I'm not really sure about the metaverse anymore, to be honest with you.
No, that's a fair point, you know, and it's an always evolving conversation. The way I look at it, it's like the digital space, which we're hanging out in right now, one of our NFT galleries, which we have some NFTs on display on the screen. So shout out to all our live stream viewers. But the digital space is not a brand new concept, right? Like being able to jump into digital space, you know, whether it's The Sims, whether it's Second Life, whether it's Grand Theft Auto, you know, us gamers understand the digital world. And the metaverse really, you know, especially when I look at like what Meta's building or what a lot of other kind of more traditional major players in the space are building that are not kind of blockchain crypto related, are just new digital spaces, which I agree are not that exciting because they're not that brand new, you know, like the experience isn't really that mind-boggling for people. But when you combine that with the digital, with the blockchain, right, with the on-chain assets. Like right now, I'm hanging out in an NFT gallery that I can share with, anybody in the world. And they jump in here, they see a lot of awesome art. In this case, this is art that I've collected, right? So it's not art I'm trying to sell. But let's say I had a bunch of art that I've put on the blockchain and I want to try to promote it to new audiences. Now I can put my art on the wall in this cool digital space, send the link out, to a group of friends or even just a group of people that have reached out maybe on Instagram and said they love my art, right? And now we can all jump into this metaverse together. I can give you a little bit of a story behind the art. And if you're someone who has an active crypto wallet or is already collecting NFTs, you would know how to easily, click on any one of these art pieces and buy the art, right? And buy the NFT. So the use case in that sense, in the sense of creating a custom environment where you can sell your art or even other digital assets, digital goods, I don't think that use case is gone away. And I know that there are still, some NFT creators and artists that are using that kind of NFT gallery use case actively. And it's pretty cool, right? And I think it works out. But to your point about the excitement and the hype, it definitely is not there. And we look at projects like the Bored Apes with Other Side, which, had a lot of speculation, had a lot of people spending, $10,000, $20,000 on the plots, which are still, nowhere to be seen, right? They were basically just speculating that this was going to be the best metaverse ever, spending, the amount of a car to buy these plots, and now they still can't really jump into the plots and actually experience it. So I think that side of it is why there is a lot of deflected or kind of disengaged people who are just kind of discouraged. I think that's the word, feeling like, well, I've spent all this money and no one's there's nothing happening. So the metaverse is dead, case in point. So how do you feel about kind of that idea that it's really like speculation versus use case? And I think the use cases are still there, whether it's selling NFTs, whether it's just showcasing your brand, the use case for the digital space is definitely there. But I think the speculation has kind of dampened a lot of hopes, and a lot of people are down, a lot of money. So how do you think, how do you see that conversation, or do you think that that's played a part in it?
Yeah, well, I think there's a difference between people who maybe are just trying to make a quick buck and the people who are here trying, like, for the long run and to build something valuable. And of course, like you said, we are already used to digital experiences already, whether it's gaming or now, like during COVID, we all had this kind of like Zoom meetings or like virtual meetings, and our digital lives are becoming more and more important, and we are used to it. But yeah, I think there are a lot of people just hoping that they will be the one to catch this new Pepe meme, Pepe coin, and be the, like, just like to get lucky. And I think, if that's your hobby, or if that's like, if you have disposable income for that, that's cool. But yeah, I think we do have use cases, but for now, no one is, from what I've seen, maybe I'm wrong, I haven't really seen anyone building something cool, And if you want to jump into the projects that are already popular, like even Pudgy Penguins or Bored Apes, it's going to cost you a lot, and I'm not sure what the return will be on that. So, I mean, personally, I'm not really into this. If I buy anything, it's like stuff that I feel is quite stable, like to hold some Bitcoin, some Ethereum, some Solana. Like, these things are not likely to be like super crazy volatile, right? And if I buy an NFT or something, it's because I really like it. It's not because I expect that I can flip it overnight and make $1 million, right? So,
No doubt. I love it. That's a recurring theme on our show, people buying NFTs for the art or for the concept even, the project behind it, the community behind it, that's what's up. So I did mention off the top kind of that you got blockchainbabe.eth, you got some ENSs. This is another use case for NFTs, right? And do you see the whole kind of .eth conversation? There's also, of course, .sol, .tez. There are other blockchain-based naming, but I would say .eth is kind of the most popular. It's the one that you see a lot on Twitter. Do you think that NFT use case is going to be, kind of going up in popularity as the blockchain becomes more popular, as people are selling goods on the blockchain more. How do you feel about the Ethereum naming service and kind of that concept into the future?
Yeah, I think it's really exciting. I think from what I read, like even if there's been a lot of different market turmoil this year, I read that ENS clocked in more than 2.2 million domain names. And I think that's really cool. Like there's like 700,000 unique addresses. And also I think they rolled out something to do with MoonPay earlier this year. And yeah, I think it's a great thing for people to start using. I think it's interesting to see where this is heading. But yeah, I mean, personally, I like it. And I think these .eth domains, it can only become more interesting, like, because you can start to use these, you can register your ETH domain, like using various, like they're accepting now more fiat payment options like Apple Pay, Google Pay. It just is a signifier that it's like growing, and there's this intersection between Web 2, Web 3, and yeah, I'm excited by it.
Yeah, there was a time when I first started really getting into the Web3 NFT conversation and the metaverse conversation. Even myself, I'll admit, where I was a little bit more Puritan about like everything should be on chain and why do we need credit cards? Why do we need, fiat options? But as we see, the adoption, well, for one, a lot of people that even took the initiative to learn crypto, to get a wallet and all that, they've gone because A, they didn't get the returns they were hoping for, or B, they just have too much, difficulties trying to sell their art and their NFTs. So I think that there's a lot of discouragement and a lot of people left. But also, there are a lot of people, like you said, who see the value in an ENS, for example, or maybe they want to buy an NFT because the person selling the NFT is an actual personal friend of theirs, but they don't understand crypto and they don't really want to go through all of the process of setting up a crypto wallet because they're just not that comfortable with it. So they can go to the website, support their friend by buying the NFT with the credit card, So I'm much more open to that now. I think there was a time when I was a little bit more like, oh, if credit cards are there, they're just, siphoning off value from the blockchain and, helping people or preventing people from actually learning, the value of using the crypto instead and having it on chain, which I still believe to an extent there is a lot of value in using crypto instead and having everything done on chain. But I agree, having crypto, having credit card options for buying your ENS or buying certain NFTs, and certain platforms have been very out front, providing credit cards since the beginning, while others, started on chain and then added the credit card function, which I think is actually the better route to go. Because what happens when you have people using credit card first, you get a lot of these kind of custodial wallets, as they call it, where they're holding the NFT for you, but there's no actual clear off ramp to have that NFT moved into your actual decentralized wallet so that you actually own it on chain. So I've seen that as a kind of weird hurdle that exists on some platforms. But all this to say, I support paying with credit card. If that's the way that you want to support a creator, then you should have that option, right? It does seem to be a growing opportunity, a growing option for people in the Web3 space, for sure.
Yeah, I had a conversation with someone recently, probably at this convention recently, but I think it's true to say that until we kind of either, well, not really simplify the tech, but if we manage to create dApps or services where we hide a lot of like this complicated stuff, like, oh, what chain am I on? Like, what network do I need? What tokens do I need to have? Like, do I have to sign? Do I have enough to pay gas fee? If we can hide all this stuff and make it like kind of more simple, then I think we will find it easier to onboard the next set of users, because the learning curve to step into Web3 is quite steep, I still think.
Mm-hmm. And do you think there's any security concerns when it comes to simplifying it, though, on the flip side? As you simplify things, people maybe don't take the time to learn, what's the value of having this NFT on chain as opposed to keeping it on this random platform that, if they don't make enough money in a year or two, might just go down and now you've lost it. Do you think that the simplicity is making is also having a lot of security risks? Do you think, there's that
Yeah,
kind of balance?
Yeah, that is a good point, and that is maybe a concern. On the other hand, I've seen that there are some wallets who are starting to introduce like different kinds of ways to sign in, and different kind of recovery options, like to have your friends or family, like, so even if you lose your seed phrase, or like, to have these kind of things is quite helpful. Or even just to have a wallet that kind of just changes network kind of automatically or seamlessly or more easily. Those things would be helpful, even for people who do use it like every day, because there's still always the risk that you're sending it to an address that's just a bunch of numbers, letters. It's really easy to make a mistake. Or maybe you have so many wallets and then you don't remember which one is related to which wallet, like which seed phrase, So there's still risk even for the people who do use it. So imagine the people who are coming in fresh. It's even worse.
That's true. And I've seen that conversation around certain redundancies, certain, sharing maybe your seed phrase with one important person or something like that. And yeah, there's always arguments for and against all these different security measures, but I agree, the more that people can understand, what are these different factors to consider, and B, what are some potential fallbacks that you could put in place to make sure that you do have, ownership, and that you don't ever lose access to your wallet, which I agree is definitely worst case scenario in the crypto space. And that's why you have a lot of responsibility in crypto as well. And I think that we don't want to lose that as well, because it is essentially trying to set up your own personal bank, right? And be able to have, more financial autonomy and more independence, as an individual in the economy. So it's really exciting to see how that's going to change things. But yeah, hopefully people are taking the time to learn how to do it the most secure way possible.
The only problem is that to be your own bank requires a lot of responsibility. And I'm not sure everyone is up to the challenge.
That's a fair point. So to that point, we did talk about kind of emerging economies. We've got Nigeria kind of leading the pack with crypto adoption. We're definitely seeing on this show alone a lot of creators using the blockchain to sell NFTs that they then are able to take that value, take that revenue, maybe pay their bills with it, or even invest it back into their community in some cases, and actually help with educating the next generation about technology and all of that. So it's super exciting to look at these corners of the world where they don't have the reliable banking that we were just mentioning, and where really setting up your own personal bank, if it was an option, a lot of people would do it. And that's why a lot of people are doing it now in Nigeria, for example, right? So how do you feel about that conversation when looking at the crypto adoption in emerging markets, in developing countries, and the undeniable fact that I think crypto is a more reliable financial system than the World Bank / traditional banks that have been kind of pilfering a lot of these countries for, decades?
Well, this is a topic that's very close to my heart, because I'm quite empathetic person. I care about people around the world. I know that I've always lived in quite economically stable countries. Like, I lived in the US, I lived in the UK, now I'm in Switzerland. I think all of those countries have a pretty stable currency, and it's not really volatile. And like you said in the introduction, like, we all pretty much have easy access to a bank or other financial services. So yeah, I feel really like touched to think about, like, I think there are so many African countries that have really large unbanked or underbanked population. But I've read that on the other hand, mobile phone penetration in Africa is really high. So it makes it easy for people to access and use cryptocurrencies. And you don't have to know much about crypto to understand, like, what are some of the benefits, like Bitcoin and stable coins. They just offer a more efficient and affordable way for them to send and receive money across borders. I think there's a lot of African countries that have experienced high inflation and economic instability. Crypto is obviously quite a good hedge against inflation generally. And actually, what's interesting to see is that I think there are more and more African entrepreneurs and fintech companies that have been, well, they're actually at the forefront of developing these solutions and using blockchain and crypto for payment, like to create these payment platforms and exchanges and even blockchain-based identities. I mean, I think it's very exciting, the stuff coming out of there. I know that there's also even now an Arbitrum Africa, like kind of community there. There's Mad Wallet, who I also interviewed, like myself, on a Twitter space. They're based in Africa. They're making like their own kind of wallet. There's so many great use cases and so many cool projects coming out of there.
That's
And
awesome.
finally, yeah, I read that maybe there is going to be, they will make their own kind of digital currency, but I'm not sure about that.
Yeah, it's interesting because I remember even back one of the first celebrities to kind of be loudly supporting crypto that I remember at least was Akon, and he was looking at it from this perspective of like, okay, Africa needs better, crypto or better currency, more reliable financial system than the current system that they're relying on. And sometimes they go to their bank, they can't even take, $100 out or $50 out. It's really sad, right? And so he had come out with this concept, a coin, which unfortunately, in my perspective, got a little bit sidetracked and taken over by the usual VC entities. And I'm not sure, whether it is the solution that Africa needs, but the vision was there, and the idea that we could create a new decentralized currency that can be reliably used, for transactions across the continent, really. And I think what I've been seeing, out of the payment space and the fintech space, to your point, yeah, a lot of entrepreneurial spirit, a lot of people, young African leaders kind of seeing that the writing's on the wall and that this new technology can solve a lot of the problems that we have in the economies of Africa, and really, break down the borders, right? Break down a lot of the frankly colonial vestiges, these kind of entities that exist from way back when these countries were being run by, people outside of the country. And so a lot of that same mentality still exists, unfortunately. We see it with, things happening with France and Western Africa right now, but also, a lot of independent countries trying to adopt something. Now the conversation around a CBDC, I think, is even worse, frankly, in that continent, or in India, which is also looking at it. I think that the power of decentralization really comes through when you look at something like a CBDC in an African country. Like, for one, their central banks are not super transparent or reliable. Obviously, it's going back to the problem we were just talking about, right? With the traditional financial infrastructure essentially being oppressive, often corrupt, and most importantly, just not reliable for your average citizen out there, right? So if you're talking about introducing a CBDC into that environment where the central bank already isn't really that reliable, like, why would you want an unreliable central bank running a new digital currency for your entire country, or worse yet, the entire continent, which would be crazy. So again, you lean back on the stablecoin conversation. And so we've seen a lot of people already using USDC essentially, or USDT. Those are the kind of the most common stable coins to essentially do international remittance, right? So you can send, say you want, 2,000 US dollars worth of Naira in Nigeria. You can order it from one of these remittance companies. It'll land in US dollar stable coin. So 2,000 USDC lands in Nigeria, and then you just off ramp that into the Nigerian Naira, right? Or in some cases, they actually prefer just holding on to the US dollar because the Naira is crazy volatile, and they don't necessarily know what it's going to be worth tomorrow. And so there's this huge opportunity, really, and we're seeing that stable coins are kind of pushing the envelope on that and really redefining what's possible when it comes to international finance, but also at the local level, being able to pay directly on your phone, like you mentioned, because mobile phone penetration is super high across the developing world. You're able to just pay right on your phone, and the person receiving payment also is cool with Bitcoin or cool with Lightning coin, or maybe it is still stable coin, getting the USDC. And now, you know, you're no longer needing banks. You're no longer waiting in a line. You're no longer being told, no, you can't get your cash today. So really exciting revolution, I think, taking place right now. And I think nobody stands to benefit more than places that are vulnerable to corruption and that have very unreliable banking systems and a high proportion of unbanked people, right?
I agree with you.
Yes.
The potential is there. We just need to make sure that we build the infrastructure so that like point of sales, you know, POSs can support crypto payments if needed, and also to set up a proper kind of regulation. And then the last part is the educational aspect. So I think if we cover these three things, we have a good chance.
100%. That's really good. So point of sale, education, and regulations. That's a great trifecta right there. It's funny because I think the education is actually outpacing both the regulations and even the technology right now. People are like, well, that would be really cool if we could do it. But the technology, the hardware is not quite there yet. Although, you know, people like Fiat24 and others are working on that solution, but they're so domiciled right now, right, in their specific jurisdictions. So Fiat24 can only do euros. ShakePay in Canada can only do Canadian dollars, you know, and Cash App is only in America. So there's all these different kind of silos of certain kind of point of sale solutions. But, you know, is there going to be a global point of sale solution? There will likely be several of them. And we definitely are seeing a lot of that popping up in the conversation around XRP, as well as the Lightning Network. I think both of those are looking to essentially be a new global, reliable currency. And it's funny because people talk about that and they always think about it like replacing the US dollar. But I think you could just as easily see a new digital global currency that's on the blockchain, or even multiple ones, actually enhancing or almost propping up the US dollar, actually. Because ultimately what happens is when it comes to see the value of these new cryptocurrencies, they're almost always off-ramping it into US dollar, right? Or US dollar stablecoin. So from a geopolitical perspective, I think there was a time when the politicians in the States were worried that digital currency was actually replacing the US dollar. I believe most of them have now come around to realize that cryptocurrency right now, at least as it currently stands, is built upon the US dollar and actually helps bolster the US dollar when looking at its adoption around the world. So I don't know if you have any thoughts on that. I'm going on a tangent here.
Yeah, the problem is that we can always print more paper money, right?
Yeah.
And if you look at how the value of the dollar over the last few decades, it's kind of crazy. I saw like a chart going back to like the 1960s going up to today. But I think that anyway, like you said, like it's not like stable coins or crypto will ever really replace fiat money. I think they can coexist, and yeah, it can only be super beneficial. But yeah, I mean, in terms of if you want to like think about where you want to be keeping your money, if you keep your money in a bank, how much is the most interest you could get on it per year? I don't know, 2%. I don't even know any.
On a good year, it was 2%. Nowadays, not getting anything.
Yeah, it's better. I mean, in my opinion, it's not financial advice, but I would prefer to lock up my money in some crypto and try to see some better returns there. If you really have the time to learn and study and know what you're doing, you could explore staking, which is even probably a better way to earn more money. But for sure, if we think about DeFi and the potential, then you compare to what is the dollar nowadays. I mean, it's not difficult to see where the potential is, where it can benefit people.
Yeah. And then you're looking at kind of taking the investment angle on it. And it's definitely a valuable conversation. And like you said, not financial advice here, but we are seeing a lot of people looking at Bitcoin specifically as a real store of value, a real kind of quote unquote digital gold, a more reliable hedge against inflation. Shout out to K-Bot saying nice job. Appreciate you, K-Bot. Thanks for tuning in. Yeah, it's really amazing. You know, it's really exciting to see, you know, where things are going, where technology is leading. And most importantly, to your point about those three important pieces, I think the regulators see the benefit of the technology. And I think that wasn't necessarily the case, 3-5 years ago, even 2 years ago, maybe. But I think, after that explosion in 2021, seeing a lot of creators and kind of community level people really benefiting from the kind of wave, that last bull wave, kind of made people think a lot differently. And I think they started hearing about it from people that they maybe weren't hearing about it from before, more of the creative artsy types now having that conversation. Oh, are you familiar with decentralization? Do you understand the value of cryptocurrency? Did you know that, I sold my art to a collector in India and, the purchase happened in seconds and, we're both benefiting from it. It's just a cool conversation. And I think that's really what has forced the regulators to kind of take a more pro-innovation stance and less of a kind of fearful or, antagonizing kind of opposition to it, right?
Well, they also need to be involved somehow, because probably one of the biggest concerns is how to tax people. So I don't think any kind of government would be too happy if we could all start making transactions and paying each other and getting paid and buying stuff. And then there's like no way to trace this really, or to enforce taxing, right? Like how to tax people. So I have a feeling that's also why, like, especially in the US, they're really cracking down, because they don't want people to pay and get paid and move money around or some other kind of value without knowing, hey, hold on, like, how can we track who's sending what to who and who owns however much, that's important.
Yeah, and I think that's where America's taken a kind of odd angle, whereas at least in Canada, I'm not sure the perspective the EU's taken on a lot of the trading that happens on chain, whether it's NFTs, which sounds like that's not being impacted by this new crypto assets regulation, or just crypto investments. The point where you tax it really is the point where you off-ramp it into fiat, which I think makes sense because it's very obvious. You can track everything, right? It's a blockchain, it's a public ledger. So at the point where it actually lands in your bank account, the government has its ways of knowing that those funds landed in your bank account, right? So if it's a huge amount of money, that's the amount like you would need to claim, at least as far as Canadian regulations goes. If you make 10,000, 20,000, however much money in crypto, and you realize those gains and you sell and you take it off in fiat, that's income, and that's the point where you would tax it. But what we're seeing a lot in the American side of things is this idea that if you sold an NFT for a gain, but you kept it all on chain, and then you went and bought more NFTs, you're still realizing that gain and you're actually should be taxed on that gain. And I think that's like saying that you should be taxed on, your value of your digital assets in Grand Theft Auto going up. That's the way I see it. It's like, how are you going to tax people for like what's happening on chain in the digital world when they're not realizing that value? They're not taking that value to themselves personally in the tangible fiat, world. So I think that's kind of the no-brainer. And I've been happy to see that's the tack that Canada's been taking, like basically until it comes off chain and meets fiat, do whatever with it. And I think that's a more sensible way to tax things, as opposed to really, looking at every transaction on the blockchain and treating it like it's a Wall Street trade, I just don't think that's a realistic way to view on-chain, transactions.
That's a great point that you make.
Thanks. I've been thinking about it a little bit, and frankly, I've been reading into the Canadian regulations, and without patting myself or patting our country on the back too much, there's a lot that we have to work on and still a lot to get right. But I do think that the innovation regulations, and across all party lines, frankly, it seems to be heading in the right direction. So here's hoping that continues. I know there was a couple other questions here I have for you, and we're actually looking at having a conversation about regulations on LinkedIn, if not this month, then the following month, but definitely sometime soon. So Karen, if you're open, we'd love to have you join on the LinkedIn panel, and maybe we could get a EU perspective from you. I could bring the Canadian perspective. We'll bring someone with a little more, knowledge about the American regulations, and we could really have a fun conversation about where things are heading and the good, the bad, and the ugly about what's to come.
It's exciting.
Yeah, that'd be fun, right? We'll make it happen. So I did mention Akon briefly there, and that was a topic that we had discussed as well, as far as these celebrities kind of jumping into NFTs and crypto and continuing to, you know, influence the space for better or worse. You know, we saw, I think Kim Kardashian has been slapped on the wrist with promoting certain crypto coins or whatever. But on the flip side, you know, Snoop Dogg basically is bringing Death Row Records onto the blockchain, which I think is kind of cool, as you know, 80s baby fan of 90s hip hop and love Death Row. You know, and he owns a Bored Ape as well. We've seen Eminem own a Bored Ape and kind of integrate it into his music videos. Justin Bieber, another one who's been kind of open about his NFTs. Do you think it's a net negative, basically, to have these kind of celebrities influencing, you know, what's cool and what's not, and really trying to kind of make a statement in the crypto space and specifically the NFT space? How do you view that celebrity conversation?
I think it's cool on one hand because we do need more visibility. We'd want to see all of this technology be more like well adopted beyond our little circles, that I feel like the Web3 space is kind of small. It's like enough to spend 1 year working and living in this space and you kind of know the key players. So, and also if you are building a DApp or some kind of services like what we are doing and many other projects, yeah, we would like to see more people joining. So on one hand, it's cool because they're giving like this platform to a whole bunch of people that we, like an audience that we couldn't otherwise easily tap into. But on the other hand, like we said before in this conversation, in general too, I think like to get started with NFTs, it's not as simple as people think yet. I think like you still have to kind of, like you said, know about like security issues and maybe know something about the blockchain. You need to have a wallet. I mean, I don't think that it's as simple as what people think it is. And yeah, like some celebrities have gotten into trouble. Maybe they don't really even themselves understand what it is that they're selling. So because we've seen a lot of like hacks and scams, people losing a lot of money, like, you know, I don't think that it's like selling. I'm now working in marketing, right? Like for Fiat24. I think it's the first time that I'm working in the financial sector. And I don't think that selling financial products is that simple. And I think that marketing and communications need to also be held accountable, because we need to make sure that the communications that we're delivering are honest, they're transparent. We don't overpromise or we don't misrepresent the capabilities of or the risks of what we're selling, you know?
Yeah.
So I guess the pros and cons of both. That's the thing.
Yeah, 100%. Definitely see where you're coming from. And it's clear, you know, working in the fintech space, they definitely make sure they hammer that into your head, because it's a big difference between your average, you know, let's say crypto developer or on-chain project that is just going for broke on-chain and not really trying to necessarily function in the physical world and offer that fiat to crypto, crypto to fiat solution. But when you're in that world, there's no messing around with anti-money laundering and KYC and understanding regulations and being very transparent about your communications and being very honest with your customers about, you know, what is crypto and why is it a great innovation. But on the flip side, what are the security considerations that you definitely have to make when jumping into the space, which are not, you know, super difficult. They're just important, you know, very simple but important. Definitely great points all around. So looking at Switzerland, I'm curious, you know, what's the NFT community like there? I think you got an NFT on your Twitter handle, or your X handle, as I should say. Yeah, what's the NFT community like out there, and how are you feeling about NFTs in general as we kind of you know, head into potentially another bull market? Do you think NFTs experience another bull market, or do they always kind of just trot along from here out?
Well, in terms of in Switzerland, there is quite a lot of interest in NFTs. There's even what's called the Swiss NFT Association, which is quite cool.
Very
They
cool.
just held their first conference like a couple of months ago. That was pretty cool. And they did have some pudgy penguins attending too.
Of course.
In Switzerland, there is a big interest. Personally, I think like I am interested in NFTs. I have a Crypto Chicks NFT and I'm part of that community. To be honest, apart from this, I haven't purchased any NFTs, to be honest with you.
Okay.
But I'm not so, I think that like everyone has said, this kind of hype phase about the PFP NFTs is a little bit on the downswing. But I think like some of the celebrities we mentioned, I think they are starting to use NFTs like really in a utility focused way, which is much more exciting. So I don't think NFT technology will go away. But for example, I forgot which artist it was. There was like that you could like when you buy the NFT, like you buy part of the royalties of a song, right? There was this thing.
Interesting.
Yeah, and so there are, and also like all of this, maybe what's his name, Gary V, where you have like, you know, like you have the NFT, but then you're part of like this exclusive community. In that sense, I think, yeah, it's very cool. I think we will need to see NFTs, but maybe not any more monkeys and kitties and apes.
Right. More from like a loyalty program perspective, right? And I know, you know, Starbucks has their loyalty program they've rolled out that incorporates it.
Yeah, exactly. I think that's where it's headed, to be honest.
Very cool. And the Swiss NFT Association, that sounds pretty awesome. We need a Canadian NFT Association going down, nice national representation. We have the Canadian Blockchain Consortium, which is a very cool, you know, lobby group. Well, not even a lobby group, but very cool grassroots kind of pro-blockchain group that we're working on. And so, yeah, I think, how important do you think that IRL kind of statement is? You know, you talked about attending the blockchain summit as well, and now something like an NFT association for all of Switzerland. Very cool. How important is that, like showing up in real life, connecting with others that are, you know, focused on the technology, on the space, and what do you get out of it when you're attending those kind of events?
Well, now that I work not only in marketing, but I'm also helping my company with business development and partnerships, I think, and also like I've seen kind of our growth over the past almost 2 years, and I cannot underestimate enough how important it is to have partnerships. I think in Web3, crypto, blockchain, you're not going to get anywhere without partnerships. So that's really important. And going to all of these events, whether it's like local meetups or like going to a bar to meet other people that like NFTs, or going to the bigger conventions, they're absolutely crucial because I mean, it's okay to hide behind your computer and you can get a lot of stuff done, and you can even kind of network or connect with people online. That's cool. But nothing beats meeting people in real life, and like the face-to-face and human interaction has to still be there. And every time I've gone to events or conferences this year, I've walked away with like at least 5 to 10 useful contacts in my Telegram, and maybe some of those people even become friends, and maybe some of those companies become partners, and that's just how you build and grow. Without this, we're not going to get anywhere.
I love it. That's so perfect. And I've definitely had the same experiences. And that's why I continue to try to attend Web3 events anytime I can. I was in Toronto for the Blockchain Futurist Conference, which was amazing. We've had a few guests already on the show that came out of that conference, and being able to connect and meet. And like you said, make new friends who are just as passionate and kind of focused on the technology and on Web3. So that's really exciting. And partnerships are key. And you don't really get partnerships. I mean, of course, you can do cold calls, you can do email marketing, you can have social media, but nothing quite kind of resonates the same way as actually like meeting people face to face and connecting with people and realizing, you know, that person's trustworthy, that's a genuine, you know, connection, and we can really collaborate and build something. So yeah, that's what's up. Very cool. I want to give a shout out to Meta Tire Man, Matt. I appreciate you. He is saying he supports the loyalty rewards concept of NFTs being more popular as we go into the future. So that's what's up. Last question, Karen. What do we have going on around the corner? What are you looking forward to? Any big plans for 2024? Any thoughts around the market and how, you know, crypto payments are changing? Crypto adoption is increasing. What are you most looking forward to?
Well, I'm looking forward to another bull run. I'm looking forward to seeing the crypto payment sector in general, integrate more seamlessly with existing financial infrastructures, even though that will not likely happen just next year. But yeah, I'm just excited to see how, like, I guess a lot of companies or startups this year during the bear market, they just unfortunately didn't make it. But the ones who are still here, I really believe that we have a good chance to make Web3 a reality. And the one thing that is definitely cool is account abstraction and trying to improve wallets, because that's like, wallet is your access key to everything. So I think wallets really need to like become more like multi-sig, use account abstraction. That will be really exciting to see.
Very
So
cool.
hopefully I just hope to see that we just keep building in the space and to see more great partnerships between like TradFi and DeFi so that we can make this a reality.
Nice. More great partnerships between TradFi and DeFi, simplifying wallets, account abstraction. Yeah, that's very interesting. And I think those are all things that we can like definitely look forward to around the corner. And yeah, I look forward to crypto payments becoming more easy and continuing to do kind of the international development side of things as well, and really focus on how we can help the unbanked, the underbanked, and kind of revolutionize the whole space. So I really appreciate you, Karen. And like I said, I'd love to have a more in-depth conversation around regulations and looking at the changing landscape in the future. So we'll definitely be connecting again. And I appreciate you rejoining the show. Is there any other final comments you want to discuss or mention before we wrap up here?
Just to thank you for having me on a second time, and also to wish you luck and to keep going because you're doing good stuff. So.
Awesome. Appreciate you, Karen. And to all our viewers, listeners, check out our corner of the metaverse at web3warriors.io. I know it is getting quieter, but we continue to build out in the metaverse. You can also check out Krome World on the Voxels metaverse. Anybody who was attending our show last week with Brooke, if you signed the guest book, you do have your new Voxel shades in your wallet. So a new wearable to wear when you're walking around the metaverse. So appreciate all y'all who are joined in on that. And appreciate everybody for tuning in. And until next time, we'll catch you all in the metaverse. Peace out, everyone. Take care.
Thanks.